Have you ever noticed how society insists that being alone is a sign of weakness? But what if I told you that true power, clarity, and freedom are only born in the silence of one's own company? While everyone chases approval, likes, and validation, there is a man who chooses to be alone and finds in solitude his greatest strength. He discovers truths that no one can teach, builds courage that no one can steal, and creates a life that no one can dictate. In this video, you will understand how to transform what many fear into an invisible ally, learn to deal with your own mind, and discover inner resources that remain hidden to those who live in the crowd. Prepare yourself to see solitude under a new prism, and to realize that being alone can be the greatest act of power you will ever know. If themes such as psychology, philosophy, and the darkness of the human soul interest you, subscribe to the channel now. From which part of the world are you watching this video right now? Leave your answer in the comments. There is something curious about solitude that few people notice. For thousands of years, being alone was practically a death sentence. Imagine a man isolated in the savannah without a tribe, with no one to share the fire or hold a spear by his side. Vulnerable, he would be devoured in a few nights. That is why our brain was shaped to hate isolation. It carried real danger. But today, in the 21st century, the scenario has changed radically. You can live alone in an apartment, order food through an app, talk to someone kilometers away, and still stay alive. Survival no longer depends on the tribe, but the mind has not updated so quickly. Inside us, the old instinct still whispers that being alone is dangerous. And here is where the paradox enters. Because while solitude activates this ancestral discomfort, it has also become the space where a man can find power and clarity. It is as if the same silence that once was a death sentence has now become fertile ground for freedom. Isolation, which once was a threat, today can be a choice. Whoever discovers this begins to see solitude differently, no longer as a burden, but as sacred territory. The man who loves solitude realizes that there is no noise of external opinions, no social mask suffocating him, and even the weight of cultural expectations seems to evaporate. Silence, far from being emptiness, becomes presence. Think of artists, philosophers, or spiritual leaders who withdrew from the world. From Buddha to Nietzsche, from Jung to Van Gogh, many understood that there was something in isolation that ordinary life could not offer. It is like turning off a noisy video game and suddenly realizing that life has another soundtrack, deeper, hidden between the lines. This dive, however, is not for everyone. Many panic when there are no distractions. Silence brings out what has been buried: memories, pains, insecurities. That is why so many prefer to run to the bar, the party, the social networks. Solitude requires courage. It opens doors we do not always want to cross. But the man who learns to love solitude discovers a secret that few dare to touch. He understands that his own company can be enough, that he does not need to fill every void with external voices. This self-sufficiency makes him stronger, more independent, and even more interesting. Whoever does not fear being alone, paradoxically, connects better with others. And it is exactly here that the first key of this mystery arises. Solitude is not the enemy, but a training ground. Like an invisible gym, it shapes the mind, strengthens the spirit, and prepares the man to face a world that keeps running away from itself. But what happens when this dive into silence begins to awaken not only peace, but also the inner beast that dwells in each one of us? When a man chooses solitude, he is not running away from the world. He is finding himself. Being alone forces the gaze inward, reveals thoughts that would never arise in daily rush. It is like opening a door locked for years and realizing what truly lives there. Quietness becomes a mirror, reflecting not only who he is, but who he could be. In solitude, external noises disappear, and the man begins to hear his own voice. That voice that whispers doubts, desires, fears, and forgotten dreams. Many times, the person only recognizes themselves when no one else is around to fill them. It is in that instant that the awareness of the self emerges, clear and non-negotiable, like a flame in the dark. Imagine a strategy game where each move needs to be thought out. This is the mind of someone who dedicates himself to his own company. Each decision, each choice, each emotion is analyzed without distractions. He learns to deal with himself, to question old patterns, to perceive emotional triggers, and to cultivate habits that strengthen instead of weaken. It is not about perfection, but intimacy with oneself. The man who values solitude learns to be his own confidant and counselor. He knows how to recognize his flaws without punishing himself and celebrate his victories without depending on others. Applause. This deep self-knowledge creates a silent strength that does not depend on external recognition to exist. Movies, series, life stories all show heroes who face inner challenges before conquering the world. Think of The Lord of the Rings and Frodo's journey, or of Bruce Wayne training alone before becoming Batman. Solitude, in these cases, is not punishment. It is a laboratory of self-discovery and preparation for real challenges. The man who embraces his silence also understands the importance of time. He does not chase approval, nor rushes to fill empty spaces with useless company. Each minute alone becomes an investment in himself, like someone planting a tree, knowing the fruit will come at the right time. Patience becomes an ally and impulse, not enemy. But it is not always easy. Confronting one's own mind can be uncomfortable, even painful. Repressed emotions, insecurities, old traumas may emerge without warning. This is where many retreat. But the man who persists discovers that facing his own shadow is the only way to grow. Solitude ceases to be only the absence of people and becomes the presence of truth. And it is curious how this silent self-knowledge creates a sense of inner freedom. He no longer depends on anyone's opinion to validate his steps, nor does he get lost in useless comparisons. Solitude becomes strength, almost like an invisible armor that protects and empowers at the same time. And it is precisely this strength that prepares him for the next level of his journey. The man who learns to be enough for himself develops something rare: emotional autonomy. He does not wait for the world to validate his feelings or for other people to dictate his mood. Each emotion is perceived, understood, and processed by himself. This does not mean harshness, but maturity. It is like learning to drive alone on a road without signs, trusting his own judgment. Imagine not depending on approval to feel good, nor on others' attention to feel important. This emotional freedom makes room for clearer decisions without social pressure. The man who cultivates solitude discovers that happiness is not a delivery to the other, but an inner creation. As if it were a work of art, he sculpts himself day after day. When challenges arise, he faces them without despair. Criticism, rejections, frustrations, everything is filtered through the lens of his own consciousness. Instead of reacting impulsively, he observes, analyzes, and decides. It is as if each difficult moment were resistance training, strengthening the mind and the heart, making them capable of enduring storms that would knock down the unprepared. In addition, this autonomy allows him to maintain healthier relationships. Without neediness or dependence, he connects with others by choice and not by necessity. Interaction ceases to be a remedy for solitude and becomes a gift, a genuine exchange, free from suffocating expectations. True connection only blooms when one knows how to be complete alone. In everyday life, this manifests in small attitudes: refusing invitations because he wants to be with himself, setting clear boundaries, saying no without guilt. It is the power of silent assertiveness, born from intimacy with one's own mind. This posture inspires respect because it conveys emotional security and stability, even when everything around seems unstable. Philosophers and writers noticed this centuries ago. Nietzsche, for example, exalted the value of being alone to strengthen the soul. His aphorisms often reflect the idea that those who know themselves deeply do not bend to conventions. Solitude, in this sense, is almost like an internal gym, where each day is an exercise of self-mastery and emotional clarity. But autonomy does not arise without effort. It takes courage to face one's own vulnerability, patience to deal with confusing feelings, and discipline to maintain habits that strengthen. It is a gradual process, silent and invisible to others' eyes, but extremely transformative. Each moment of introspection is a small victory toward inner freedom. And it is precisely this emotional freedom that creates the foundation for everything that comes after. A man who does not depend on the world to sustain himself emotionally is ready to build his life in a conscious, strategic, and true way. Solitude ceases to be absence and becomes a platform of personal power, preparing him to face greater challenges without losing his essence. When the man embraces solitude, the mind begins to organize itself in a way that the world's agitation would never allow. Thoughts that were once confused align. Priorities become clear. Decisions become simpler. It is like cleaning the screen of an old computer. Suddenly, everything works without freezing, and the vision of what is essential becomes crystal clear. The silence of solitude is a powerful ally. Without distractions, without notifications, without external pressures, he perceives patterns in his life that previously went unnoticed. Situations, people, habits, and beliefs begin to make sense naturally, almost as if his own mind were assembling a map of what truly matters. This clarity is not limited to rational reflection. The man who knows himself alone also feels things more deeply, understanding his own emotions and motivations. It is like adjusting the focus of a camera. Everything around still exists, but he can choose what to capture and what to let blur. Perception becomes selective, precise, and strategic. In practice, this means making decisions with less regret. He knows how to distinguish between impulse and real need, between momentary desire and lasting goal. Even conflict situations become easier to handle because he sees the full context, understands what he can control, and what he must let flow without unnecessary anxiety. Movies and series often illustrate this without realizing. The hero who temporarily withdraws from the world gains clarity about his mission. Think of Yoda training Luke in Star Wars or Jon Snow isolated in the North in Game of Thrones. The withdrawal allows the Tvayod mind to see patterns that constant presence in the world would not let perceive. The man who values solitude also learns to organize his external life based on this internal clarity. He sets priorities, eliminates excesses, chooses projects and relationships that truly make sense. Each action becomes more intentional, almost as if he were playing chess with his own existence, instead of reacting to other people's moves. But the path is not always easy. The mind, when faced with so much silence, may bring up doubts, fears, and regrets. However, by confronting them, the man realizes that inner chaos is temporary, and that clarity comes precisely from the courage to face his own inner world. Each moment of introspection is a window to wiser decisions. And it is this mental clarity that sustains all the other pillars of the life of someone who embraces solitude. Without it, emotional strength, autonomy, and creativity have no direction. With it, every step is conscious, every choice is strategic, and every lived silence is transformed into an instrument of personal power. And it is precisely this silent preparation that guides him to the next level. The man who surrenders to solitude discovers that silence is fertile, almost like well-tilled soil for rare seeds. Ideas begin to emerge without hurry. Unexpected connections bloom, and previously stalled projects come to life. It is curious. The more alone he is, the more the mind seems to conspire in favor of creation, as if solitude itself were an invisible co-author. In the absence of external distractions, he can dive deeply into thoughts and experiences. Every detail of daily life can inspire an idea. Every memory can turn into an insight. The mind becomes a laboratory, testing concepts, exploring possibilities, and creating solutions that would never arise in the constant noise of the world. Great artists and thinkers proved this. Van Gogh painted whole nights alone. Kafka wrote in silent rooms. Newton discovered fundamental laws away from crowds. Solitude is not merely an absence of people. It is an intense presence of creativity and focus, where imagination expands without limits or interruptions. This creative freedom is not limited to the arts. An entrepreneur alone in the office late at night, a scientist isolated in his laboratory, or a writer reflecting in an empty park, all benefit from the same phenomenon. The mind finds more original and effective solutions when it does not have to compete with others' opinions. It is in this state that he learns to trust his own ideas. Dependence on external validation diminishes, and each insight becomes proof of his own ability. Creative confidence is born precisely from the courage to explore paths without the immediate presence of spectators or critics. Films and books reinforce this notion symbolically. The hero who temporarily withdraws from the world creates brilliant strategies and solutions. Think of Tony Stark isolated in his workshop, or Sherlock Holmes immersing himself in his cases alone. Solitude acts as a catalyst, transforming the mind into an almost limitless force. But it is important to remember that creative solitude requires discipline. The mind, free to wander, can get lost in unproductive daydreams. The man who knows himself well can balance inspiration and execution, turning abstract ideas into concrete results. Every moment alone becomes an opportunity, not waste. And it is this creativity fed by isolation that strengthens all the other aspects of the life of someone who chooses solitude. It is not merely pastime or refuge. It is a tool for construction, a strategic weapon, a means of expression, and a path to autonomy and clarity. And it is this same creative force that prepares him for the next chapter of his journey. Introspection is a skill that is born in solitude. The man who learns to be with himself can observe his thoughts, emotions, and behaviors without external distractions. It is like having a magnifying glass for one's own mind, capable of revealing hidden patterns and understanding deep motivations that often escape everyday perception. In this silent observation, he discovers strengths and fragilities that previously went unnoticed. Every habit, every automatic reaction, every hidden desire becomes evident. By confronting these internal truths, he gains power over himself, because understanding is the first step to transformation. Introspection is not just looking inward. It is mastering one's own internal territory. Philosophers and thinkers for centuries have praised this practice. Socrates said that know thyself was the foundation of all wisdom. But the modern man, surrounded by stimuli, hardly finds space for such reflection. It is in solitude that introspection becomes possible, creating a direct connection between consciousness and action, perception and choice. The power of introspection also strengthens resilience. When crises arise, he already knows his triggers and limits. He does not panic easily because he understands the inner ground he is walking on. Each external challenge is filtered by internal clarity, making impulsive reactions almost non-existent. Solitude thus becomes a silent training ground for facing life. In daily life, this practice can be simple: walking alone, meditating, writing, or simply sitting in silence, reflecting on events. Introspection allows planning conscious responses, choosing paths without outside influence, and making decisions aligned with one's deepest values. Every moment alone becomes a strategic investment in oneself. An introspective man also develops true empathy. By understanding his own emotions and patterns, he begins to recognize those of others without hasty judgment. He sees that each person carries their shadows, desires, and fears, and learns to interact more deeply and authentically without relying on social masks. But, of course, introspection requires discipline and courage. Confronting one's own mind is not comfortable. Repressed emotions may surface and cause discomfort. However, those who persist discover that each internal challenge faced is a silent victory, one more step toward complete mastery over oneself and over one's life. And it is precisely this power of introspection that allows the man who loves solitude to transform silence into action, thought into decision, and self-knowledge into strength. He not only survives his own mind, he uses it as a tool for growth, preparation, and influence, paving the way for the next stage of his journey. The man who learns to love solitude develops a subtle immunity to external expectations. He does not easily bend to others' opinions, nor does he seek approval to validate his choices. This resistance is born from intimacy with oneself, from the certainty that one's own judgment is worth more than any applause or criticism. How many times have you seen someone act just to be accepted or to avoid feeling isolated? This invisible pressure shapes behaviors and limits dreams. The solitary man, on the other hand, understands that true freedom begins when we stop living for others and start living according to our own internal compass. Philosophers like Nietzsche and thinkers like Thoreau showed this. Voluntary isolation strengthens character and clarifies values. Being alone is not weakness. It is an opportunity to learn who one really is. Social pressure loses its power when one discovers that self-worth does not depend on applause, likes, or the approval of crowds. In everyday life, this resistance manifests in simple choices, like turning down invitations or refusing favors without guilt, but also in bigger decisions, changing careers, leaving toxic relationships, or pursuing paths that challenge conventions. Each firm step toward one's own desire strengthens autonomy and builds a silent reputation of integrity. The solitary man realizes that living to please is living in the shadow of others. He learns to say no with conviction and yes with awareness. This posture creates respect, not necessarily friendship. And curiously, the respect of those who observe his authenticity is much deeper and more lasting than any superficial affection. Everyday stories confirm this. Leaders, artists, or visionaries who strategically isolate themselves manage to create impact without relying on popular opinion. Steve Jobs, for example, had convictions that distanced him from immediate consensus. But his decisions were guided by internal vision, not by momentary approval from others. But social resistance also requires balance. Being impermeable to pressures does not mean cutting all ties. It means choosing which influences to accept and which to reject. The man who embraces solitude develops this filtering ability, maintaining healthy relationships and keeping unnecessary interference at bay. And it is this resistance to external pressures that prepares the ground for the final dimension of solitude, the construction of an almost unshakable inner strength. He does not depend on the world to sustain his identity. Solitude becomes shield and sword, and this silent preparation takes him to the next level. When the man masters solitude, he realizes that it is not absence, but full presence of himself. Each moment alone strengthens mind, body, and spirit. It is a silent energy that accumulates without others noticing, making him resilient, creative, and aware. Solitude is not emptiness. It is a reservoir of power that few learn to explore. This integral strength allows acting with clarity and purpose without being swept away by the noise of the world. Each decision ceases to be a reflection of the environment and becomes an expression of one's essence. The man who embraces solitude learns to trust his judgment, to listen to his intuition, and to build life strategies that work from the inside out. Solitude also strengthens patience. He understands that true growth takes time, that solid results arise from consistency and not haste. Each moment alone is a silent training of discipline, self-mastery, and preparation for real challenges. It is like training on an invisible field, whose effect manifests in all areas of life. Emotional resilience, mental clarity, autonomy, and creativity intertwine in this process, forming a man capable of facing crises without losing himself. He transforms obstacles into learning and external pressures into opportunity. Solitude reveals itself as a practical school that teaches what no crowd or advice could teach with such depth. Historical and contemporary examples are abundant. Einstein worked alone on his theories. Van Gogh painted immersed in his own company. Strategic leaders withdraw to think. Solitude, in these cases, is not exile. It is a space for cultivating power and wisdom, a ground where the mind flourishes and finds solutions invisible to the common eye. And, curiously, this silent strength is invisible to many, but noticeable to those who observe closely. It is not seen in noise, in words, or in applause. It is felt in posture, in confidence, and in the autonomy that becomes natural. It is a discreet magnetism, a presence that commands respect without demanding approval. But of course, solitude only transforms into integral strength when it is chosen and understood, not imposed by life. Those who embrace it out of fear or escape hardly reach this level of power. The secret lies in the awareness that being alone is not punishment, but opportunity, an opportunity to know, strengthen, and align every aspect of one's existence. And it is precisely this integral strength that defines the man who loves solitude. He does not fear silence. He does not depend on the world. He does not get lost in distractions. Each layer of the mind, each emotion, each skill is refined in this process, creating a complete, conscious, and prepared being. And it is this solid foundation that leads the final journey, where all the silent lessons meet. So, after all of this, what did you think of the power that solitude can bring to your life? Did you see yourself in any of these experiences of introspection, creativity, or emotional autonomy? Which next character would you like us to analyze on the channel to uncover the psychology behind their choices and inner strengths? If you want to keep diving into this deep knowledge about mind, behavior, and silent strength, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. That way, you will not miss any content that will transform the way you understand yourself and the world around you. These two videos in front of you are not here by chance. And if everything you believe about yourself is only a reflection of someone else's gaze, click now on one of the videos beside this one and begin to break that mirror. You will have to risk the click. So which one will you choose?